Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Daly.
Here.
Vice President McNall.
Here.
Trustee Clements. Here. Trustee Headland. Here. Trustee Valentine. Here.
Thank you. The board just concluded our annual building walkthrough with Mr. Tim Walsh leading the way. It was great to see all of the work that's been done by the Buildings and Grounds teams. And we thank Mr. Walsh for taking us through that, and Ms. Dinio and Dr. Benante for their assistance. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 5th at 7 p.m. right here in the auditorium. And I will turn it over to Dr. Benante.
Thank you, Jen. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I did want to mention and remind the board of our joint retreat this weekend.
Sure, do it.
As well with Garrison. You should have received an agenda this afternoon or this morning, and Catherine is also securing our lunch orders. So just a friendly reminder there if you haven't gotten back to Catherine yet. And we look forward to meeting with Garrison, the Garrison Board of Education on Saturday at 9 until 1 o'clock, and the topic is educational equity. And I was talking with Mr. Albano, the superintendent at Garrison, yesterday about the agenda, and I'm really looking forward to what they have planned. Just a few updates. Thanks to Tim for the extended walkthrough. As always, we enjoy that time with Tim. And we did initially have on the agenda this evening a discussion around a campus master plan, RFP. Tim and I have been talking a little bit about that and decided to delay that discussion just for a bit longer as we continue to get our process laid out for how this will unroll. So bear with us. We look forward to sharing some more information with you soon, but we did decide to hold on moving that topic forward today. I did want to mention just one other thing before we go into a presentation from two of our administrators, that you may have heard about a really tragic incident in the Arlington School District just north of us here. Whenever we've unfortunately been at times experienced real hardship here as a community, and we've benefited from accessing PNW BOCE's regional support network for additional clinicians to come onto our campus. Such a network does not exist to our in Dutchess County, but we did offer our support to the school. And I wanted to thank Amanda Kochin, Scott Manny, and Renee Curry, each who have volunteered their time to meet with students on designated times and for a couple of hours over the course of the next few days if needed. So it's our time to reciprocate what we've had the opportunity to be the beneficiaries of in the past in our region, and we're happy to help Arlington as they deal with a really tragic incident in response to a tragic incident that occurred last Friday. And again, thank you to Amanda, Scott, and Renee. With that, I would ask that Ms. Rounds and Ms. Jamin come forward. They're going to provide an overview on an action item that you have on the agenda for later this evening. And I'll just set them up. At one point, a couple of years ago, the board approved an update to our academic intervention plan. And through the strategic coherence planning process 2 years ago now, we determined that it was necessary to revisit the manner in how we approach that plan and create an updated plan for multi-tiered systems of student support. So Tara and Christine are going to provide a broad overview. They're happy to answer your questions. And again, this is on for action later on in the agenda. So Tara, I'll turn it over to you, it looks like.
Okay.
And I'll step aside.
Okay. Good evening. So tonight, as Dr. Benante said, we are asking the board to adopt our multi-tiered system of supports plan. And we're going to go through a little bit of the process that got us here, the why we developed a multi-tiered system of supports, and some of the changes that were made from our AIS plan in creating the multi-tiered system of supports, or MTSS plan. Okay, so the Haldane School District AIS plan was adopted by the board in 2017. And that plan included assessments used for entry and exit criteria for academic supports, but not specific and clear guidelines. It included what types of assessments we were using for students to enter and exit AIS in either math or ELA. It did include a definition of Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports. It included a variety of sample parent notification letters, but not one letter that would be used that met all of our requirements for the entire district. It focused on academic intervention, but it had limited mention of additional supports such as social emotional supports and behavioral supports. It did not define grade level achievement on the assessments used. For example, it quoted that we would use NWEA benchmarks, but didn't say what those scores at each grade level should be. It did not provide a framework for K through 12 alignment, so there was no continuum outlined in the document that provided information as to where we wanted each child to be at each grade level. Okay, so you probably remember seeing this multiple times, this pyramid for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports. So why a multi-tiered system of support plan? And the reason we developed a multi-tiered system of support is because it is a framework that matches interventions to student need in both academics and in social emotional functioning and behavior. So it really supports the whole child. The tiers are the same that you've seen in response to intervention, but they go beyond academics, as I said. And you'll see Tier 1 is core instruction, whole group instruction. That's designed for everyone. Differentiated could be small group. Tier 2 is more targeted intervention, so that's where we see a lot of our AIS supports beginning for students, as I said, in math and ELA. And then Tier 3 is more intensive intervention, and students may have more specific targeted skills and spend more time or have smaller groups in their AIS setting, and that can also include special education supports and related services at that level. So this is just an overview of the process that we used to draft the MTSS plan. So this work began in spring of 2020 with the Haldane Curriculum Council. And at that time, the Haldane Curriculum Council reviewed our existing AIS plan. We reviewed AIS plans and RTI plans from around the region from other districts to compare and look at any areas of need that we were missing. In the fall of 2020, we formed a strategy for subgroup as a result of this strategic coherence plan. So strategy 4 is to ensure that all students, including those from historically underserved or vulnerable populations, have high expectations for success and equitable access to opportunities to learn. So for us, looking at this as a vulnerable population being students who are struggling academically or students who are struggling with behavioral needs or struggling with social and emotional skills. In the winter of 2020, we began the collection and the review of our internal AIS documents. So we had groups from our subcommittee go to the elementary school building, the middle school building, and the high school building to collect all of the documents that we were using. Those included referrals to what we used to call our child study team, our documentation for letters that we sent home to parents, and all of our AIS forms that were used at those grade levels, including our guidance plan. After reviewing all of those documents and reviewing the New York State RTI guidelines that are provided and making sure that we aligned our plan with the New York State guidelines, we drafted our MTSS plan. And then finally, in June of 2021, we presented the draft to the entire Haldane Curriculum Council for review and comment and to make any final changes. So this is just another visual, and it shows that for an MTSS or a multi-tiered system of supports, you see at Tier 1, both social emotional skills and academics are differentiated or explicitly taught skills at the whole group level. At Tier 2, you see that both academically and for social emotional skills, we're looking at targeted interventions. And then at Tier 3, more intensive interventions in both areas. I will turn it over to Christine.
Thank you. So we wanted to highlight some of the changes that we made and that you can see in the new document compared to the old document. One of the first things you would notice is that we added clear descriptions of what those supports are at each level, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and then also at each building as you move through the progression from elementary to secondary. In those descriptions, we also added what those tiered supports would be for social, emotional, and behavioral supports. So there's 2 sets of charts for the elementary, 1 for academics, 1 for social, emotional, and behavioral, 2 for the middle school, and 2 for the high school to highlight all of the interventions that we are currently using in our schools. We also defined the entry and exit criteria. Now, these definitions were in use prior to the document. They just hadn't been outlined within the plan. So it was going to the child study teams and meeting with the teams and looking at which benchmarks and which assessments were being used at each level, and then documenting them clearly so that it became more formatted and more structured as to how we saw students entering AIS supports and also knowing when they were ready to exit those supports. And then we created a uniform parent notification letter in both English and Spanish so that our parents are familiar and see similar language as they move through our school system rather than seeing a variety of information as they move through. When we looked at the RTI guidelines from New York State, we adjusted the frequency of our intervention and the duration of those interventions to how long they would last for a student so that we were aligned with the guidelines. So for example, Tier 2 previously was 30 minutes per week. Under the new plan, it's 3 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes so that we're in alignment with those guidelines and best practice recommendations. The guidelines recommend that a certified teacher deliver Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. We were previously using teaching assistants and teachers for literacy and math. So as we moved into this school year, we're only using certified teachers K-12 for our literacy interventions. We are still using some teaching assistant time at the elementary level for math intervention, with that being a goal and a highlight of over time increasing our use of certified teachers in that area. And then also on page 5, you'll see we formalized the formation of a building data team. Again, this was a practice that was informally happening where at the change of marking periods or as NWEA data was coming in, it would be reviewed at the building level. But we've formalized that that's an expected practice as part of this plan, that as you change a marking period, that data is viewed at an overall picture, and also then to just review any students that whose data stands out at that time in case they haven't been, in case they haven't come up till that point. So overall, we see the benefit of the shift that an MTSS plan more closely aligns with our practices and beliefs of supporting students both academically and with their social, emotional, and behavioral needs. We believe that this plan is more closely aligned with the state guidelines and best practices. We believe that the clarity and the criteria is going to help us make sure that our students are getting the right supports or that they exit those supports and are integrated more with their peers. And that it acknowledges that process that was in practice already, K-12, of supporting our students' behavior and social emotional needs that we always took very seriously here, but weren't formalized within this process. and that this is aligned with our strategic coherence plan and our belief that we should be looking at students who have been historically underserved and vulnerable and making sure that they are accessing quality education and opportunities to learn. The plan is linked there, and you guys have hard copies in front of you, so if you have any questions, Ms. Rounds and I are here.
I have a question, and you may have mentioned this in the beginning, but just for my context. So you said that we had approved a plan previously in 2017, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And then here we are hopefully approving this plan in 2021. Is it typical that it is like in every few years there's a revisit, or is there a set time frame that the district relooks at it, or am I remembering that this was somehow triggered by Judy Barbera's presence with the curriculum position, or is all of that true?
Yeah. So the last plan was a 2017 to 2019-20 school year plan.
Okay.
It was set to expire in that 19-20 school year.
Okay.
And COVID made that process of creating the new plan slower than we would have liked. So we started in that spring of 2020 when it would have been right after the last plan expired, and then with the full closure, our plan took longer than we would have liked.
I see. And is this one, I'm sorry, is this one set to expire?
So our thought would be that we would submit this one periodically, whether you wanted it yearly or every 2 years. I think the exit and entry criteria will be pretty stable, except for the state test cut scores change slightly as those get submitted. So these are based on the last state cut scores. The 3 through 8 are currently embargoed, and we don't have those just yet. So that would need to be updated periodically, but the plan should be relatively stable. With some of those entry and exit criteria, talking at the secondary level, especially about what region scores they've been most targeting for students to get additional support. I think we'll have to see if those are exactly right or adjust them a little bit as we have them more formalized and documented.
So it's a living, breathing document that you stay connected to based on the school's changing needs, state's changing requirements. It may get updated as early as next year. If you see a need, it may not get updated for a couple of years if it's holding steady.
Right.
Gotcha. Thank you.
How did you all decide what, so that I'm referring to table, I think it's Appendix A, which is the range of services. So how did you all decide, like, this is what's going to happen for Tier 2? I mean, what you would do at Tier 1 seems pretty straightforward to me, but like, how did you decide, like, this is what's going to happen at Tier 2? For reading, it's going to be 3 times a week, this many minutes. For math, it's going to be 3 times, you know.
Those come from the state guidelines.
Those are the state, that's where you were referring to the state guidelines.
That was part of the work, is making
Gotcha.
sure that we were aligned with
Gotcha.
what the state guidelines were mandating that we should be doing as far as minutes and frequency.
And I like, I mean, the idea of a data team, like, certainly really important since the whole thing is really data-driven. Is there anything in place, like, so there's definitely figuring out, like, data, like which children need to be referred, which children are making progress and can be exited out. But, like, what's the plan in place to make sure that the interventions that you have here are being implemented as well, right? Because there's lots of reasons why a child might not progress out of Tier 2 and need to be accelerated, right? It could be the child, but it could also be like instruction. So what's a plan to make sure that the interventions are being delivered as well as you all want them to be delivered?
So that's the work of our student support team, which we used to call child study team.
Okay, so the data team and student support team are 2 different teams?
Yes.
Okay.
So the student support team would review progress over time, reconvene. The teacher would be keeping documentation of what interventions are delivered, how often, and for how long.
And is there a rationale for having the data team and the student support team be separate? I mean, or what's the rationale? Obviously, there is a rationale because you decided to do that. What's the rationale for having the data team and the student support team be separate?
So your student support team is going to be a group of people that work directly with that student that you're concerned about, as well as if you were seeing, a social emotional need, we might bring in the behaviorist or ask for speech language, or if there was pragmatics or anything like that, it would be anybody who would be brainstorming about that particular child. The building team could have some of those same members.
Making sure that there's a systematic approach to using data.
Right, looking at the bigger picture, definitely looking and making sure that there's, nobody who all of a sudden their data had a big drop and we haven't talked about that or something like that, but it's more of that bigger picture. I imagine, at the high school it'd include your guidance counselor and things like that, but the bigger picture for the building with still some attention.
I mean, I think this is really great. I mean, I started out with a lot of questions, but I think it's really, especially for parents that are going to get one of these letters, like that can be a really surprising thing, right? Like, how was this decision made, Is it equitable, right? And this is a way to really both to hold ourselves accountable, but to also really communicate to parents that we're applying these, reasonable decision-making points. So it's really great.
And I think along those same lines is including the exit criteria too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so that
Exactly.
we're giving
Yeah.
these services, but then when a student no longer needs them,
Right.
we're exiting them out and have those clear guidelines
Right.
for the interventionists to follow.
Right. And there's always, it's not set, that's the whole idea, right? That it's not exiting out at one point doesn't mean a child would never receive services again. It's really sort of, because I think a document like this can, not that I expect most parents are going to pick it up and read it, although some really may, but especially for parents that are entering into the system that they may not understand, this really helps, helps explain to them, what's going on, and why.
I
Thank
also
you.
really liked that, that in Tier 1, that all students are in a tier.
Right.
That Tier 1 is for all students are getting differentiated instruction. That
Right.
it's not, there. It helps to reduce the stigma, I think, of getting extra support.
Sure.
That actually all students are getting extra support. They're all in these tiers, and just where they fall in those tiers is the difference. But everybody's in a tier, everybody's getting differentiated support. I think that's a really great approach to how we're educating our kids.
Thank you.
A couple questions. Are there entrance or exit criteria for social emotional learning on their own?
We didn't put those in. I think it's harder to quantify
Sure.
that. I would say my experience would be it generally starts at observation and suggestion, and if observation and suggestion are sufficient, you don't move into more significant plans.
And so we do have a process of our interventionists for social emotional functioning and behavioral functioning writing clear goals for students, whether they be formalized on, say, an IEP, or whether it's informal, these are the goals that I'm working on, so that we have an idea of when that goal is met and can measure it, and when they no longer need that level of support. Additionally, they're collecting data as well. For instance, our behaviorist, if our behaviorist is coming into the classroom and seeing a behavior occur 10 times in an hour, the way that we're decreasing services or pulling back on supports is when we see that number decrease over time.
Okay. Let me ask a related question. If you're high performing academically, can you be receiving social emotional support through this tiered service? Absolutely. Okay. And so that based on observation, classroom observation by the teacher or any participating educator. Okay, great. Yes. The other question would be, as you look to other regional peers in terms of looking at the plan, did you find, and you may not have gotten here, but did you find any who you thought were really good at implementation of the plan, e.g., they did a great job of growing students out of the Tier 2 or Tier 3 support and back into Tier 1. So that the plan seems to be, there's structure about how do we assess, what are the services provide, how do we document in and out and all this sorts of stuff, but then there's the actual implementation, and I would assume that different districts do different, better, not as good jobs in doing that. I was wondering whether there are learnings from those that we could take, if that makes sense.
So when we reviewed their plans, we didn't review what their actual data was for discontinuing and exiting students. We looked at, what services they were offering at tiers, whether they explained those services, whether it was a broad overview or detailed. So we were looking more at what's included in the actual plan.
And I would say the plans that we saw were either academic intervention plans or response to intervention plans. We didn't find, at the time that we started, other districts around that had multi-tiered system of support plans, but we felt like that was the best documentation for what we were doing and held to our beliefs of supporting both sides of students.
I wouldn't want to suggest exactly how this should happen, but it does seem like a way, so John mentioned, do we look at how other people are doing, their success? It would seem to me that if we're implementing MTSS effectively, and we can document that the incoming, our population of students doesn't change really dramatically in terms of their incoming skills or weaknesses, that there would be a way for us to see if our MTSS plan is working, to see, does the percentage of children who aren't meeting, state level proficiency, does it begin to go down? Does it begin to go down for certain groups? And it would seem to me like that could be potentially a next step for the team to think about. And you wouldn't expect, I guess you all have been doing this for a while, but you wouldn't expect things to happen really dramatically, but you would really want to see that. That's where we'd want to see, is this being successful? And maybe you all are already doing that.
Right.
I have a couple of questions or just clarifications. The AIS class is sometimes referred to as the resource room, sort of. Is that the same thing in one way or another?
So resource room is a specific special education service.
Right.
So a resource room would be on a child's IEP who has an IEP, a classified student. And it's a class of no more than 5 students receiving supports on specific goals such as study skills or test-taking strategies, or to support the other core subjects.
Gotcha.
Whereas AIS is for anyone. It's not, students with IEP, you don't have to have an IEP, but you can have an IEP to get AIS services. And it's all based on the criteria that you see there.
Great. And my other question was, and this is in social emotional supports, it's one of the only areas in Tier 3 where it says outside referrals, and I assume that means, can you describe?
Sure.
to me
So,
what-
for example, we work the best way for me to talk about it is just to give you an example, so I hope I answer your question. We work with an agency through Putnam County called CCSI, and it's where we can contact somebody from the county to come in and have a meeting with us on a specific student, a specific family who is struggling, and they'll identify outside supports, whether that be, a respite worker for the family, whether that be a teen support group. It could be something like a big brother, big sister type person in that child's life. That is an example of where we would bring in outside referrals. There's times that we refer to local therapists that we know have specialties. We have a list of therapists and counselors that our families have used, and we'll hand those out. And we have many resources outside that we can refer to. Did that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, entirely. And my last question is, the evaluation when recommended by the Committee on Special Education, that's when a parent or a guardian hasn't requested an evaluation can be recommended by the CSE, if, for instance, what would that look like?
So that would be if the student support team or the parent or both believe that at Tier 3, a child needs a referral to the Committee on Special Education for a specific assessment.
Great.
Okay?
In the appendix, the range of services on page 8, in the Tier 2, when you're talking about a standalone class, that's, the kids are taken out of the classroom and they're in a separate room.
At which grade level?
Middle school, page 8.
So in the middle school and the high school, academic intervention services can be a separate elective class that they're taking during their school day. So the frequency of that, they might have a math class, an additional math class, or an additional reading class to support them during their school day, in addition to their regularly scheduled course.
Thanks.
At the elementary school, where we don't have periods, it pulls them out of their first choice is their extended learning time or their independent reading or writing time.
Okay, great. Yeah, please.
One, I just wanted to thank Tara and Christine for their work on the development of this plan, and I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Judy, who I know still tunes into our board meetings. So Judy was also a big help, and I think in the future, if we were to provide an update, I want to, many of these elements fall under general education supports, not special education supports, which is Tara's direct area of oversight, but Tara was a great help in reviewing our previous academic intervention structure, because at times there is this bridge between general education and special education when it comes to intervention. In the future, this would be something that Josh would certainly come to be more involved in, but given that this was a plan that was worked through and developed largely before Josh arrived, that's why Josh isn't standing up here as well, and I know Judy would want to be. I want to thank the board really for your support in two areas over the last few years that has really helped us expand our range of services and support for students. You approved the recommendation for a behaviorist, to include a behaviorist as part of our staff. That certainly helps us on the social emotional end, as Tara and Christine alluded to. And you also approved the use of some federal stimulus money to support the continued employment of an interventionist, which, as Christine noted, and I want to emphasize this, has shifted us from our students' ability to work with certified teachers. Nothing against our TAs. Our TAs have been great support, but specifically in the area of literacy intervention, and that's really going to benefit our kids down the line. Peggy noted the way the document is laid out is really also to support parents in understanding our system, so parents could better advocate for their kids if they see something that may be of concern to them. While there is some a technical nature to when we're looking at NWEA scores, that's certainly something we could walk through with parents, but having really clear entry and exit criteria puts a parent also in a better position to advocate for their child and coming to understand when they are eligible for academic intervention services. So I think in the spirit of transparency and also seeing our parents as equal partners in the education of their kids, it's important to have those criteria clearly outlined and listed there. And just one other note, Jen, you were asking about potentially the future, how often the plan would be revisited. I'm not aware of any necessarily regulatory requirement similar to other plans that we act upon. We can always double check on that, but as Christine and Tara noted, are the extent of our interventions that are listed at Tier 2 and Tier 3. We could always be extending what we have available to kids in those areas, particularly in the area of literacy. We use a particular model. We have a particular intervention support that we're utilizing right now in the area of literacy. However, there are others, if we were to see a student's not responding to that method of intervention, that we could then turn to. So you may see down the line a recommendation from me to expand professional development, to have one of our specialists certified in a particular reading intervention. Again, that would be in the spirit of expanding the repertoire that they have, repertoire skills that they have to deliver different types of intervention or different modes of intervention at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 level, which I see as something, as John mentioned, other school districts, what they may have in place. Other school districts may have several different models of intervention available at Tier 2 and and Tier 3 level as students demonstrate that they're not responding to a core intervention model that a school district may have. So I just wanted to mention those few things. And again, thank Christine and Tara for all their work on this. I know it was a lot of work last school year. Thank you for your presentation this evening.
Okay, is there any communication from the public? All right, we're going into our information reports. The team is here. It's so exciting to see everybody here together. Miss
Oh, yep, that's my job. Sorry.
Miss Jammin, elementary school principal, come back up. I know, I'm sorry.
I'm getting my steps in. So the school year started, and we are here and in person, and that cannot be minimized. So definitely thank you to our families and our teachers for your trust and work as we open the school year. Before I look at my report, I just want to mention that our curriculum night is tomorrow. The welcome is at 6. It's on Zoom because having multiple parents for the number of students in our room would definitely not allow us to keep the distancing that we're working so hard to have in our classrooms. So we are virtual for our curriculum night tomorrow. We're hoping that guidelines continue to allow us to have in-person parent conferences, which are more one-on-one and would be around individual children. So that's in December. We're hoping that things stay well, but I'm looking forward to seeing all of our elementary families on Zoom tomorrow for our curriculum night. I want to highlight our 5th graders and their work both this summer and as we re-entered for the school year. As they left 4th grade, I went to all of their classrooms and spoke to them about the importance of their leadership within the building and looked for volunteers to work with me over the summer to welcome new families, which we had 22 new students returned to Haldane, some were brand new to Haldane for this school year. And I had 20 5th grade volunteers, which is quite a number considering the size of our school, who volunteered to either come and lead tours for our new students or to participate in our kindergarten read aloud and orientation day. And so this year, a goal I have for our 5th graders and our 4th graders, and as they move up through the elementary school, is really giving them opportunities to be the school leaders and take on those leadership activities and be the role models that I know they can be, and to really set a tone for our school culture. So I think all of our 5th graders who came and participated in those events, they were just the cutest as they helped. It's hard to compete with a new class of kindergartners. They might have been the cutest, but our 5th graders were awesome, and they worked with our families and our new students on a number of projects. Actually, Dr. Silkey's 7th and 8th graders came to talk to me about wanting to do additional leadership work in the elementary as in the coming months too, which ties into our Read Aloud program, where I am pushing in and reading books about school community and what kind of school we want and how we want to treat each other. So they came to talk to me about whether they could participate in that and also do read-alouds with students around how we treat each other. So more to come on that as we move through the year and more books are read, but right now all of our students are hearing books on kindness and inclusion and respect and how our Haldane Essentials tie into what we want for a school community and how we want to arrive at school with each other each day.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Dr. Silkey, middle school principal.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be back here with you tonight. I echo Christine's sentiment about the opening of school and how it can't be minimized that despite this terrible pandemic that we are together in person, and that's a lovely thing. I love greeting our students at the flagpole. And I would just add to that I'm so excited with the work that some dedicated parents have done to keep the outdoor classrooms going, and that the board has supported the continuation of the tents and the funding for that with Dr. Benante's help. So it really creates the opportunity for our students to have maximum time outdoors, which is, good for their learning, good for their health, and a win-win all around. So I'm very happy about that. The middle school curriculum night is also virtual. It will be on Thursday, and it's by grade level band. So looking forward to having parents tune in to meet their students' teachers and to hear a little bit about the scope and sequence of the courses that their students are taking. It should be a lovely night, albeit a virtual night. And then, not on my board report, but hot off the presses, I met with Jeff Silverstein, who is the PTA's vice president assigned to the middle school this year. And we talked about the possibility of bringing back the community read, because the community read has been a longstanding tradition in the middle school. I believe started by Mrs. Sniffen and her group of parents way back when. And last year we were unable to. The community read usually happens in the dead of winter, right? It's like it's that first week of February, where the holidays are all over, but it's too cold to, start with anything outdoors. And it's a really great way to bridge that cold winter month. And Jeff Silverstein and I talked about the fact that we can't do it inside. Like, that's probably going to be prohibitive because of COVID mitigation protocols. But if we wait until mid-March or late March, we can do the community read outside. So we are going to take that on. So if you're watching this and you're a middle school parent and you're an avid reader, look for an invitation from myself or Jeff Silverstein to join the committee to select the book for the community read. And we hope to have that selected by the end of November, because I know that many families purchase those books for holiday gifts, and they become good winter reading. So we're excited about that. And I'm also very excited because I started meeting with our teachers. Our teachers, as part of their APPR plan, have to submit annual goals, and those are due on the 30th. So I started meeting with our teachers just to hear about their goals. And I'm really impressed with the work and the thought behind integrating the essentials into their goals. So several of our humanities teachers have really inspiring goals for integrating wellness into students' writing. And several of our math and science teachers have really inspiring goals for integrating problem solving and critical thinking into the coursework that our middle school students are doing. So more on that to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sniffen.
I think my opening statement is going to be the exact same statement as my colleagues. But as you all remember, the high school started in cohorts, where we were not all in and didn't have the ability to be all in at the beginning of last year due to space. But it's been wonderful to bring everybody back. With that being said, we recognize the importance of some time for reflection and some time to really think about what the impact has been of COVID on our high school students. In hybrid last year, their change in sports, their extracurriculars, their clubs being virtual, all those things that we remember in our own high school experience that felt very different for them. And we felt we needed to take the time to talk through that with them. And when you walk into a junior classroom and you realize these students haven't yet had a full, real, what we all think of a regular high school, and they're juniors, it's a pretty big deal. So what we did was Mr. Cowan, myself, Amanda Koch, and the guidance counselor, and Scott Manny, we split up, and two of us went into each of the social studies classes over a course of 4 days. So we had a really small group to be working with and to talk through some of the things and intentions we had. And the first thing we did, which we actually did at our faculty meeting as well, was we gave some space for reflection. And we gave the students 4 prompts, which we also did at the faculty meeting, which is, what have you learned about yourself through the pandemic? What are you happy to leave behind from last year? What would you have done differently if you could redo it? And how do you plan to reconnect back with your school community? And through that process, we did not force students to talk. We just kind of put it out there. And then said, anybody want to share out? And they talked. It was pretty amazing to hear. It was amazing for, I think, the students to hear how some of them loved the cohort and the small class in front, and some hated it. It was cool how some of them liked Zoom and others hated it. So I think it was nice for them to see how one another has been impacted through this and how they have not all responded the same way. It was interesting for some of the students to share, my parents didn't let us go out, we didn't have any social interactions outside of school, and then other students were like, oh, we did. So I think there was a lot of mutual respect that was also gained through that process. Following that, we then took some time to talk about the clinical team and the social emotional supports that we have in place. We took some time to talk about academic expectations, behavioral expectations, and then, interesting, we have a lot of historical pictures from past events, whether it was homecoming or Halloween, or whatever the event may be that really showed school spirit and kind of who we are and what our culture is. And we shared a mini slideshow of some of those days and those events to try to build up some excitement about possibilities through the school year. We then showed a short video on the Haldane experience, which I think most of you have seen. And then we talked about hopes and fears for the upcoming school year. We talk about, you hear Tara and Christine talk about Tier 1, you're talking about MTSS, all of this stuff ties into that, really working with our students. And Christine was speaking about the fifth graders and how she was using them as leaders. And an interesting dynamic I think that happens here at Haldane is our seniors, while fifth grade is definitely the leaders of the elementary school, the seniors are here, and K-12 sees those students every day, and they really do set the tone for the entire district. And it gave us an opportunity to speak with our seniors about what it means to be seniors at high school. Just one other quick thing to note, parents should have received a text message today to check your emails if you are a 9th and 10th grade parent. We are doing in-person 9-10 parent night. Based on social distancing, we're asking for only one guardian or one parent per household to come and then hopefully be able to share out the information. But that will be on October 14th for any parent. If you didn't get the message, there was a text and an email, so please check that.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Rounds.
Hello again. So tonight I wanted to talk to the board a little bit about one of my goals for this year, one of the PPS department goals, I should say, and that is to reestablish transition procedures for secondary students and staff. So this came out of a need that was identified over the last year or two. And what I'll say is there's a list on my board report of some of the activities that we do with students as they're getting ready for post-secondary life after school, whether that be college-bound or career-bound. There's several things that we get them involved in. We write transition goals for them. We provide a career or vocational goal on the IEP that they work on, either in the resource room or with their guidance counselor. We do interest inventories. We interview students about what their aspirations for a career might be and what they need to do to get there. What we found is that we're doing a lot of these things, but there was some overlap and there may be some gaps, right? Usually where there's overlap, there's somebody that's missing something too. So this year we're really going to, we have a team together of special education teachers and guidance counselors, myself. We're going to be reviewing our transition procedures and starting to make sure that we know who is doing what task and making sure that we're covering everything that we need to cover for regulatory purposes as well as meeting the needs of our students. So we also, we identified this need, and then this year, you've heard me talk before about the state performance plan and how our department is given different indicators every year. Groups of districts are given, indicator 1, indicator 2, and they all have a specific task involved in that.
indicator. One year we did the parent survey. Indicator 11 was that parent survey that we did on CSE. This year we have indicator 13, which happens to be transition, which is very lucky for us because it aligns well with the goal, and we're going to have some assistance from PNW BOCES transition specialists. So this team is going to meet around bi-monthly with PNW BOCES, but we're going to also meet on our own and make sure that we're reestablishing these procedures. Some of the procedures include referring to an agency called Access VR that offers vocational supports for students as they're graduating, communicating with some of the other agencies, such as the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, to coordinate services after school, tours of our PNW BOCES vocational training, interest inventories, which we do in guidance through a program called Naviance. Related services. Some of our related service providers, counselors, and speech language therapists work on the soft skills of, things like interviewing and showing up on time for work and those things. And I just wanted to point that one out because just earlier this week, I received an email from a parent from a high school student, and it was to our speech language therapist who's been working with one of our high school students on those soft skills, getting how to go on a job interview, how to let your employer know if there's a problem or if you have a question. And that parent was very happy to say that that student got her first job, and she'll be working in a community store. And she said that, the work that was done in speech language therapy based on the student's needs had really helped her with that. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elder, first board report. First time I'm saying the Director of Curriculum and Human Resources. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. As the newest member of the team, I'm very excited to give my first report to this board of what I hope to be the first report of many, many. And so I think a lot of my colleagues have already echoed this, but the beginning of the school year is always just such a great time. It's a great time for reflection, rebirth, thinking of things, of possibilities that could be ahead. And I think that is reflected in this year is that we welcomed 7 new staff members through our new teacher orientation, myself included. And I think that's a testament as a 23-year veteran in public schools to be able to go through a new teacher orientation multiple times is exciting. It's also very interesting to see the way that a district kind of onboards its new members. And I think that that's really where you start seeing the values and the beliefs of a school district really come through, because it's really hard to onboard somebody in totality in a one-day kind of workshop. So you got to be really intentional about those things that you are sharing with these new people. And some of these new people are for their first jobs, or many of them were like myself, were transfers from other places that were seeking new opportunities and new growth. And so as the newest member of the team, I can say that I was extremely impressed with the way that that was facilitated by my colleagues, and just in general with all the conversations that I've been having with people here at Haldane as I've transitioned into the role. It's been a great learning curve and met with really great individuals. Along those lines, we had our 2 superintendents conference days, and superintendents conference days are really an invaluable opportunity to welcome, veteran staff and new staff together. And it's always interesting because you're always trying to plan those with a couple of things in mind, I feel like. There's always the logistical things that teachers are really looking forward to, like setting up classrooms in time to find supplies and pens and pencils, and all of that stuff is extremely important. But it's also a really good opportunity for doing some really good K-12 work, some really work that broadens or affects the entire organization. And I would say that that was definitely accomplished over these last couple of days, those 2 days. As somebody was new, I inherited this, but the administration team really facilitated a couple of really great activities as a K-12 staff, a common experience for all of our staff around the Haldane Essentials, a deeper dive into some of the work that had continued last year, and really lays the foundation for someone like myself and the building principals to continue that work in more depth as the year provides. And I think you've also heard a couple of examples, but there was a really intentional focus on the wellness of not only staff and faculty, but also students. And so you hear these examples from Ms. Sniffenen talking about how they went into classrooms classrooms, or Ms. Selke talking about her middle school students, and as well as Ms. Jamin about her leadership skills in the elementary school. And I think those are testaments to how those times and those superintendent's conference days can really kind of lay a kind of a conceptual foundation for teachers to go in and kind of see some work that impacts everybody from a K-12 perspective. And so I know that many people have been excited about this role for some time now. I am extremely grateful to be part of the Haldane community and to fill these roles, and I look forward to future updates in the areas of curriculum instruction and the ways that we're moving forward in achieving these goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Cowan. I think it might also be your first board report. Oh my gosh. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to be back in front of you folks again. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to give you a brief athletic report. I'm excited to share that our fall season of interscholastic sports are back in full force. We are currently running all of our fall sports teams that we have traditionally offered to our students, and I'm happy to report that we have been able to do so safely. As we approach the midway point of the fall season, I'd like to share that we are excited to bring back our homecoming week, scheduled for October 4th through October 9th. During this week, we will have fun daily themes to encourage school spirit. We will celebrate our fantastic school and sports teams during our pep rally, and each of our varsity teams is scheduled for home games on Friday, October 8th and Saturday, October 9th. In addition, we will also honor some of the greatest coaches, athletes, and athletic administrators that Haldane has ever seen at halftime of our football game, and the following day at our annual Hall of Fame induction ceremony at the Thayer Hotel. I encourage our community to seek additional information on this event by visiting the Haldane Athletic webpage, specifically the Hall of Fame link. I'd like to add to my report one item and congratulate our 2020-2021 student athletes for your commitment to your academics. Haldane High School was recognized as a Scholar Athlete Team School of Excellence by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. And I'd like to say thank you to our teachers, coaches, and staff for your dedication to our students. And I would like to say well done to our student athletes who commit the same effort to their academics as their respective sports. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Walsh.
Good evening again. As mentioned during the walkthrough earlier tonight, the Facilities Department had a very successful summer. The physical work of cleaning all furniture, stripping and waxing floors is in itself enough work alone, but the crews did a great job of adding to their work list, which included the complete painting of the high school, all classrooms and hallways. We also ran over 7,000 feet of data cable throughout the lower building. We also completed other work such as the rebuild of the 90s storage shed, which was an eyesore down there if you pass by it, as well as some campus beautification projects. We also had some capital construction work ongoing, which included the replacement of the elementary school building windows, security infrastructure project, the replacement of security cameras, and the installation of door access control throughout exterior doors. In addition to that capital work, we're continuing with the capital program. Even though this summer's just ended, we're looking forward to our other future projects, including the electrical mechanical upgrade project, which is currently out to bid. Bids are due October 13th. We're also continuing the design phase of the district office structural reinforcement. And as Dr. Benante mentioned, we are working towards a campus master plan. We have that RFP in draft form. We presented it to the Buildings and Grounds Committee and received some feedback towards the RFP, which we're in the process of incorporating into the RFP, making sure it's the product that we want before we disseminate it out. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move into our consent agenda, but I first just want to say what an absolute pleasure it is to have all of you here. And I hope you feel that you are an absolute source of pride for the district. It's just a pleasure to work with you, and I am super excited for our fully integrated team. So thank you for being here. Consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? This is our approval. We're approving a Think Ahead Chess contract. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Unfinished business. These are our Board of Education goals. Ms. Platt?
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the Board of Education goals for 2021-2022 as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? We've been talking about these for a little while now. Everybody's happy with them? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Approval of the district goals. May I have a motion? I'm sorry, Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby adopts the district goals for 2021-2022 as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. This is just a little brief follow-up. Thank you to Maggie, who brought this up at our last meeting. We were talking about our board committees and reviewing the committee charges. And one of the pieces of the puzzle is the parent representation, which our committee charges state are selected by the PTA. And we had just a question of, well, how does the PTA select those parents? And none of us had the answer. So I reached out to the PTA leadership, who also doesn't quite have a clear process. So they are happy to have the issue brought to their attention. They're happy to work with the board on developing a process that the board is comfortable with, continuing to be the agency or the group that supports the selection of the parent, but doing so in a way that the board is happy with it. So I spoke to Dr. Benante, and we thought that maybe some next steps would be just talking to the PTA leadership and seeing what their thoughts are. So it was a great thing that Maggie noticed, and it seems like there is some room for improvement, and that the PTA leadership is really excited to find that improvement as well, and is committed to supporting the district as we'd like them to. So that's the update. Any questions or comments?
Are there no policies or procedures sort of written down any place for the PTA to make these determinations, or is it just something that is understood
It is
because
not
it's
currently
ours?
in their process. They do not currently have a protocol or a process for it. That's not to say they couldn't look up like the national or the
Right.
state standard process and adopt what those
Right.
organizations do. But I have a feeling what they'll do is work with Dr. Benante, and I'm happy to step into that conversation as well and just do what we'd like them to do.
Great.
So, yeah. So I'll keep you posted if anybody has any thoughts that you'd like to share along the way about that to me, as Dr. Benante and I set up some time to meet with the PTA president. Feel free. But it's in motion. Okay, the CSE, CPSE recommendations. Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the Committees on Special Education and Preschool Special Education as presented.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The approval of the MTSS plan that we heard about earlier. Ms. Platt.
Be it resolved that, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the Haldane Central School District MultiTiered System of Student Support Plan for the 2021-2022 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, just a quick question. So do we readopt this every year? if we're adopting it for the 2021-2022 school year?
Good question. I don't believe it's required to be approved yearly.
Okay.
I mentioned that earlier. I will check on what the regulatory requirement is for board review and approval.
Sure.
But it's not, I do not believe, it's not intended as it's drafted to be a one-year plan.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Thank you to Ms. Rounds and Ms. Jammin for your work. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any communication from the public at this time? All right, board committee reports, policy committee update. Peggy, do we have an update?
Well, the update is that we're getting ready to start our work for the year. We're working on setting our first meeting date. Meeting's going to be a little bit tricky because I'm traveling a lot this year, but we have a designated time. We're going to try to meet every 4 to 6 weeks. And I'll be working on a plan to get us started before our first meeting, which I actually think will be sometime in October, just given my schedule. And it'll be, just as a reminder, there's a couple things that we're going to want to accomplish. One is to begin our 3-year review process of the policy committee, just reading all the policies, right? So I need to take a look at the number of pages, and we need to come up with a schedule for how to do that. The purpose there's actually really 3 things we'll be doing. One is starting that process. The second is to begin implementing our new process with the support of Megan Shields of keeping up with all the policy updates that we get from Erie BOCES, making decisions about which policies we think we might want to adopt and bring before the board, but basically just keeping up to date with what needs to be refreshed and addressed. And then the third piece of our work is in the process of going through the last big audit and reviewing everything. Dr. Benante, Jen, and we identified some policies that we think need some immediate attention because they just came up. And so those will be, I think it'll be a little bit, I've been thinking about it. Well, I'll need to figure out how to balance those 3 things because the policies that we want to address are kind of, they're policies that are kind of tricky. And not because they're like politically complicated, but they just came about in different ways and we just need to figure out how to handle them. So anyway, we're starting our work. There's actually really quite a lot for us to do and we'll need to figure out sort of what makes sense. And it may be that we need to start by reviewing the policies that came up in the last audit that need our attention and maybe put off till later this year, the regular reading of, reading through the 900 pages, 750 pages of the policy manual that we want to accomplish every 3 years. So, but the good news is, I think we're in a pretty good place. Like, this was something we've recognized for a long time that we needed to get in place, and I think we're developing that process.
Yep.
We're
Thank you.
implementing the process we developed, I'll say that. Even better.
Thank you, Peggy. Westchester Putnam School Board Association update. I don't really have an update. Our first meeting of the school year will be next week, so I will update you along the way. But rest assured, the organization is working on our behalf and gearing up for whatever is in store. So I'll update you along the way. Okay, board reflections. Anybody have anything to share? Superintendent, final thoughts?
Jen, did we mention the school foundation's fall fundraiser?
No, we did not. Would you like to?
Allow me, yes.
Do it.
That the HSF will have their annual fall fundraiser, which is great. It's going to be done very safely at the Taconic Outdoor Education Center. The theme is Party Under the Stars, October 2nd from 7 to 10 p.m. And you're also invited, if you get in early enough, space is limited, for the special VIP bourbon and bubbles tasting, which occurs from 5 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
as well.
And thank you for the School Foundation for all of their work.
It was great work for us. Yes.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.